We have John in Florida who's calling to talk to Jenna and Matt. How are you, John?
Hi, John.
Hello, Matt. How are you today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm pretty well. I'm a big fan of your show. I just wanted to ask why. So I'm a theist, and I just want to ask why Christianity is such a if it's a detriment to society, or is immoral, at least to believe in a God. Like, is it something that negatively affects people?
Is what something that negatively affects people?
Is the belief in God. Just for argument's sake, let's say the Christian God.
Okay, so what notion of Christian God? Like, are we going with just what the Bible says, or some specific denomination?
Let's say we go under the most popular form, which would be Christianity. And I'm only saying the most popular form of Christianity, or the most popular accepted form of the Christian God.
Sure.
I'd
So,
say.
do we have any good reason to believe that it's actually? Do we have any good reason to believe it's actually true?
Not at all.
Okay. So, do you think it's a good thing for people to run around believing something when they don't have any reason to believe it's true?
Well, you see, that's what my question was all about. Regardless of whether the Christian God may be true or the doctrine is true.
I understand. That's why I asked you the question. Do you think it's a good idea for people to believe things that aren't true?
Not at all.
Yeah. And if you're convinced of something and it turns out it's not true, then whatever convinced you means that there's a problem with your reasoning skills, right?
Correct.
And so if there's a problem with your reasoning skills and it's such that you are now susceptible to believing things that aren't true, then how many other potentially untrue things are you not going to believe? Meanwhile, let's say we go with, like, I was a Southern Baptist for a number of years, most of my life. Let's say we go with just like that model and what I used to believe. Now, not only am I donating money to my church and going to my church on a regular basis, so I'm spending time and money pushing for an idea, which we're in agreement, I guess, is not necessarily true. And all of the money that I've ever spent, all of the money I've ever donated, all the time I've ever spent, every second I've spent praying, every second I've spent working around the church stuff is all wasted and could have been spent on actually doing things that are supportive of the truth, sound reasoning, and the betterment of humanity.
That's very, very true. That's a great way of putting it. So I was thinking quite the same thing when a couple of people were talking to me about it, and I was talking to some other philosopher friends of mine. So I guess the next question I have, if you don't mind, is if it's detrimental to the individual that chooses to believe in a God, or, well, I know you can't choose to believe things. It's things that I guess you could say you self-deceive yourself to believe. But is it something that can negatively affect the individuals around you as a believer rather than just yourself?
If you believe that women are inferior to men and shouldn't own property, which is a biblical view, then yeah, I'd say that those beliefs are harmful. If you believe that a man shall not lie with a man as he lies with a woman, and you have, people you care about who are gay men, then yeah, that's harmful to people around you. The beliefs we have, determine how we're likely to vote and what kind of rights we're going to afford people and how we're going to treat people who, don't necessarily fit with what our religion tries to claim is a good thing. I don't know, Jenna, did you have a question for John?
I'm actually curious. He said that he agrees that there's no good reason to believe in it, but he's still a theist. And I'm just curious, like, you agreed that there's no good reason to believe in it, and you agreed that you see that there is harm when people believe things that aren't necessarily true. And I'm just curious, why are you still a theist?
Well, I'm still stuck on Pascal's wager, and I know that Pascal's wager is still quite a debunked argument, and I definitely understand logically that it contains plenty of fallacious arguments, and it, Pascal's wager shouldn't be taken seriously. However, I still find myself to the point where I'm taking the theistic point of view when it comes to Pascal's wager.
Yeah, the problem is, you're only taking Pascal's wager seriously with regard to one thing. For example, Pascal's wager could just be saying, you know, hey, what if you're wrong? Well, okay, what if you're wrong about which religion is right? The mere fact that there are religions out there that you can't show are false doesn't tell you which one you should follow. So do you then begin to follow the one that has the best heaven or the worst hell? Or do you go with the one that has the best odds of being true? Or do you go with the one with the most followers? Or do you go with the one that's most scientifically accurate? What is the methodology to pick which religion is the one that you're going to go with, even if you accepted a version of Pascal's wager?
In my case, unfortunately, that would have to be indoctrination. There's really no other reasoning I've come to besides it. So
except that's not a reasoning. That's not a reasoning. So what you're saying is exactly the same as if somebody came to me and said, hey, I really don't want to be racist, but I was raised by racists and I was raised by those ideals and I was indoctrinated to be racist. So I'm just going to keep being one even though I don't want to be. That's how silly this sounds.
That's 100% true, Matt. I don't disagree whatsoever. It's something that I'm definitely considering recovering from religion for, because I'm aware that there's no logical reasoning to believe in a God. However, I still choose to believe in one.
It's definitely hard. It's hard to let go of that.
Definitely. I did. I don't want to take up too much time. Rather, do I want to shift the conversation? Feel free to steer it wherever you want. But going back to the original point, Matt, you were saying things that the Bible advocates for very personal moral things, and I want to agree with that. But when you argue from personal experience, theists, I mean, I've listened to your podcast plenty of times, but the theists always disagree with those moral views. So it seems that the religions, or I guess you could say the religions that have built up this false portrayal of what should be considered moral and immoral, because they're leaving out things from the book that they use. Wouldn't you argue that maybe it isn't too bad of a methodology, because people are making, well, I'm sorry, it's not too bad of a methodology. I mean, I'm still stuck on the fact that it may not be necessarily bad to believe in a religion where outside of the religion, they 100% understand and agree with us morally and agree with us on just about everything else, as well as reasonability and coming to conclusions.
I'm not aware of a circumstance where that's the case.
Have you looked up any deconversion? Have you listened to any deconversion stories? Like, have you listened to people's exiting from religion and their experiences? And have you heard their stories? Maybe go look into those, because there's a million reasons why there's harm, and everybody's got different experiences, what harm they're bringing from it. I actually just got done doing a conference on my own personal experience with harm from my indoctrination. And it was, I mean, it's a straight lecture. So there's plenty of reasons. Like for me personally, it was the fact that, you know, for example, you're not allowed to use any type of birth control. You're not allowed to use any kind of contraception. So you can't pull out, you can't use a condom, you can't take a pill, you can't do any of that. You have to have sex and let things happen as God wants. And that caused my parents to have a lot of kids in a very rapid succession, very close together, with not a lot of finances. And so that made things very difficult from the get-go. So that's like just one of the examples of just one of the things that people take from the Bible and misconstrue it and twist it. And it just turns into this harmful thing that people pass down, and they say, oh, well, we can't question it. We got to take it on faith.
Matt, before I ask another question, is there anything you want to add on? I don't want to interrupt you.
Oh, I wasn't going to add anything. It's just that, you know, like, I will say this, though. When I said hello and I said welcome, because Jenna and I are here, you keep only talking to me and only saying my name. And Jenna just talked to you and said something. And without even like acknowledging it, you're just like, Matt, I wanted it before you say, I mean, I just wondered if you heard what Jenna said, and we're, you know, because we've got other callers waiting, and I don't know what else to do, because you basically say that you have no good reason to believe. You have no good reason to continue believing. You understand that things are bad. It's just that, or these things are potentially problematic. It's just that you're going to keep believing anyway. And I really don't know. What would you say to somebody who came to you and said that they were going to stick with their religion and they didn't have any better reason than you did? Okay. I guess we'll take that as a cone of silence, drop of, I don't know.
Sounds like he's struggling, which is understandable.
It's really confusing to me when I have somebody telling me that they're going to, A, choose to believe something, because I don't think belief's a choice, but B, that they're going to choose to believe something knowing that they don't have any good reason for it, just because they're potentially scared of something, or they, what if I'm wrong? What if this happened? And it's like, but that's true for any view. And the whole point is to get to, he talked about what if it's not that bad of a methodology? Well, first of all, Christianity isn't a methodology, and just going with whatever you indoctrinated with isn't a methodology either. I mean, methodologies require thought and evaluation of one thing compared to another thing to figure out which one is more likely to be true or better or useful. It's one of the toughest calls to deal with in the entire time that I've been doing this show, is someone who seems to be eager to let me know that they're knowingly, willingly, eagerly irrational and unreasonable. And that this frustrates them, but they're not going to do anything about it.
Yeah.
I don't know. My brain can't work that way.
Well, I guess that's the point where I would recommend calling Recovering from Religion, just talking to people who have just gotten through it and have advice.
Yeah, I think I was going to recommend Recovering from Religion if you hadn't already mentioned it. And I think it's good. And hopefully you'll give them a call and talk to some people who may have a better way of speaking to him about his issues than we will.